In This World, That Other World, and the Next, by Carole McDonnell. The inhabitants of No Rivers are fiercely proud of their backwardness. They wear their backwater lack of technology as a badge of honor, despite the mocking of colonists from other terraformed planetoids and territories. Shirisha had not expected to be plunged into homeworld nostalgia when she awoke from cybersleep. For a moment she understood the cultural shock that Earthworlders and other colonists felt when they traveled to No Rivers, her homeworld and the only pleasure planet in the quadrant. Although she was nowhere near her childhood home, the accent and vocabulary of her attendant and new colleague suddenly made her homesick. But shame stood alongside homesickness. Shame. The other emotion Shirisha felt when Heian took her out of storage, his phrase. Taking a landlubber from a cryosleep pod doesn't necessarily require human hands, but some stuff machines can't handle, or they can't handle right. Heian had lifted Shirisha's stiff, immobile body from the pod with such care and gentleness that shame should have been pushed away. But the default human response for the helpless who are being helped is always shame. And when you're born and raised in No Rivers, shame was pretty much your response to everything. Another reason why those in the American quadrant still worship the god of outcasts. The transport had landed on Prometheus 10 after a 2-year journey. Not that Shirisha was aware of the passage of time. She woke looking into the eyes of Han Hyun, or Hyun Han, for those like Shirisha, from New River's American quadrant. Through the mental fog, she noted that her new colleague didn't wear the beige tunic and blue breeches of the Medicorp general. Still wearing the black and brown of the prison medics, she eyed his jeans warily and wondered, regular clothes? Is that the current fashion of the planetoids in this sector, or do nurses dress differently here in the hospice? Soon you'll be dancing trippingly on the dance floor, Boo, her new colleague said, surprising her with not only his old-fashioned lingo and New River's accent, but his oddly familiar tone. The name's Heian. Shirisha's mouth was heavy and words were slow to come. Although the trip seemed to have happened in only the blink of an eye, notwithstanding the dreaming, she hadn't talked in 2 years. She managed to smile and wondered, Heian? Is he from New Rivers? People on other planetoids got weird about names, giving their kids monikers like Starbright, Skyleaf, and the like. Even the rebels on Morgana 72 and their descendants had new style names. Folks on No Rivers, however, were different. Traditional to an extreme, as they were in all things. Heian, Shirisha, proper Earth names. Names that hinted at their Earth origins and clans. Clans were important to people on No Rivers. There was a mix of good and bad if one was born and bred in No Rivers, but the whole clan thing, the historical records of the 153 clans, and the dividing of the planet into ethnic sectors, that was problematical. Or as the kids in the international school would say, that was the main bad thing. Heian chattered on, using old-timey words she herself often used, the vocabulary that colonists from the poorer colonies inherited from their ancestors. Lingo forsaken and forgotten by present Earth dwellers a gazillion miles away were defiantly upheld by their cousins in outworlds like No Rivers, often causing those unfamiliar with the old words to resort to their translation apps. Heian set about working the controls, and as the oxymix flooded Shirisha's nostrils, he said, It's hard to breathe real oxygen after being in liquid all this time, but not to worry, not to worry. It'll be a piece of cake, he winked. This is the good stuff. Shirisha smiled, slowly raised her right hand in a thumbs-up gesture, a gesture rarely used on Earth but widely used on No Rivers and in the older colonies. Atta girl, Heian replied, with a wink that Shirisha tried but could not return. Heian appeared to be about her age, somewhere between 60 and 75 years. Straight black hair, gray-white at the roots, in his blue shirt, yellow vest, and faux denim jeans. He reminded her of Ning Chi, uncannily so. Ning Chi was always a weird dresser, just plain odd. That was what had drawn her to him when they met at the international school, that and his shy, frail beauty. Shirisha lifted her hand slowly, tried to speak as his slanted almond eyes urged her on. After 30 or so seconds and great effort, she managed to stammer, "No River's Chinese quadrant?" He clapped his hand, delighted. "The mouth is working! And yes, sister landsmen." "Brother landsmen," she replied, smiling and drooling. Embarrassed, she reminded herself that she'd seen a lot of drooling in her life. She'd been a nurse for 27 years when the order for the New World came in. 27 years on a prison planet, Heian said. The Galactic Industrial Prison Complex. Not the best of assignments, Shirisha thought, but the pay was good. The politicians hadn't wanted to seem soft, even though the prisoners' labor was needed. In order for the politicos to appear tough on crime, the medical corps had to be collateral. So contained only by the wide, terraformed, Dyson-sphered sky, the box's resources were scarce. Its pleasures almost non-existent. Its food, crap. Little gray wafers, little green wafers, big red ones on Sundays. For the prisoners as well as us nurses, the prison chaplain, the COs, and the admins. Heian adjusted the suction tube around Shirisha's mouth. "But now you're here. A happier place. And Alicia is nearby. Real gardens, flowing streams, walking biomutated pets out in a breathable atmosphere outside the box. No limitation set on communications anywhere, anytime. Gonna retire there?" "No." Shirisha shook her head with as much energy as she could muster, barely moving it. And why the heck does he mention Alicia? Everyone knows non-Eugens aren't allowed to migrate there. Sounds like the kind of thing Ning Che would tease me about. "Returning to No Rivers?" Heian asked. Shirisha shrugged, or rather the machine shrugged for her. "Another of the wealthier colonies?" Heian asked. "Or Earth?" Shirisha gurgled a weak, "No, neither." "Good," Heian shouted. "We wouldn't fit in. They'd spot us as off-worlders. And not the chosen eugenically elite off-worlders either, but the ones descended from criminals." Shirisha tried not to fall back into cryosleep and all its stasis. Technically, the 2-year journey would have taken 40 years. Her body now felt as if she'd lived those 40 years under a water-filled barrel. She didn't travel much. She didn't like entering cryosleep or waking out of it. She was certainly not a fan of thrusting herself into the caring bosom of silent, empty interstellar space. That's one of the reasons she'd stayed in the box for so long. The box. Prison planets have no names. Needless to say, the prisoners on BX-40 gave their terraformed home a name. The Box, BX, the Box. The name fitted. Traveling alone in a driverless conveyance from terraformed world to terraformed world, hoping the ship's program would protect you from meteors, skyjackers, and Lord knows what else, was an act of faith. Faith in technology or faith in some supreme being, both of which Shirisha often seriously lacked. Every time she put herself in one of those ships, it was a case of the faith rubber hitting the existential road. Like most of the inhabitants of No Rivers, she was the last of believers in a divine being, and strapping one's medicated self into the ship's pod required faith in the skill of man and the mercy of God to travel interstellar space safely. "I hear that on the Box, ships only land when medics or guards retire, transfer, or get promoted," Heian said. He was chattering while checking her vitals and responses. Shirisha nodded, weepy at her numbed helplessness. She hadn't thought of leaving the Box, but then the local quadrant leaders, the sector governor, and Earth emissaries decided to terraform a new planetoid and designate it as the Old Astronauts' Home. Shirisha had seen the orders for its world coming in. Whether airy creations born from the astronauts' travels, from space madness, or from dementia, with each purchase order, all of the denizens of the Box, prisoners, guards, admins, the medics, would lighten up, would be refreshed. They'd hover over the computers and read the specs with the delight only innocent children had. And when the 3D printers whirred, the prisoners' joy was palpable. When tests proved their creations viable, Shirisha almost danced, and transmitting the 3D creations to Prometheus 10 filled them with ecstasy. Giving the astronauts' creations life gave them life. They remembered their humanity again as they imagined the joys of those adventurous old men and women reliving their adventures in the galactic frontier. And all during the creation of the planet, Heyun, a man she'd never met or known, kept sending requests that Shirisha transfer to the new astronauts' home. The request that piqued her interest was the one listing the names of the dying and disabled astronauts who would be housed there. That was when she saw Raymar's name. She began to think that life was short. Yes, still short. Despite millennia of medical advances, the average life expectancy was still 90 or 100 years. Death had not been conquered. Immortality still had not been achieved. Shirisha figured she should transfer and live among the hospices and hospitals with those dying explorers. And she would meet Raymar, her Sean father, disabled though he was. She accepted Heyun's request, and now here she was with Heyun, a person who felt oddly familiar. There were two major differences between lying in the travel pod and lying in the new one. The first was that she was now awake. The second was that she now had control of her own imagination. Everything else was the same. The trip had been full of dreaming, manipulated and natural. So, in addition to the simulated dreams, she also naturally dreamed of Ningche. Over the course of her life, Shirisha had grown to be wary of imagination, both the natural and the induced kind. Both types could be abused and generally were. As a kid, she'd wasted much time worrying about her father far away. There were nights she couldn't sleep, so fearful was she of her dear father's ship being battered by meteors, vagrant light pulsars, and the like. All her daily and nightly thoughts were on her father. The only comfort was that she was not alone. On No Rivers, many of her friends had absent fathers. They shared the same plight. Grief and worry for a father far off, employed in a dangerous job. True, her father's job was more glamorous than that of the miners on nearby planets, but fear is fear. And when she found out that Raymar wasn't her true father, but an honorary communal lie, in this case a Tarkin, she was startled for days, troubled for months, then embarrassed, as many of her friends had been when they also heard their own truth. She had loved, dreamed of, worried for, and written to a stranger, and that stranger had played along. It was a devastation that echoed throughout her life more than the truth might have. But she had not only seen her own battles with imagination. The world was full of such stories. Imagination sickness, the Medicorp folks called it. The overuse of imagination, naturally or via simulations, to escape their sad and drab lives. People who had married the wrong person and who fixated on their great might have been. Folks in love with their dead lovers, people like Ningche, who could never let go. Imagination, the tool of regret, was everywhere, especially in the prison. And Shirisha had had to endure it. Her imagination was now her own, and because Heyun kept bringing up the patient's charts as she rehabbed, particularly those of her Shon father, it naturally mused on the old days when she spent all her waking hours dreaming of Raymar. The tradition of the Tarkan Shon father was found only on pleasure planets, for obvious reasons, and the astronauts who discovered a woman on the pleasure planet had named him her child's father were generally honored by it, or at the very least they took it in stride. Often many of them were loners and childless. Astronauts were generally a realistic lot who roamed the stars because they were tired of humanity's evil. Whatever they were, the love between the children and their Shon fathers often became reciprocal. That had been the case between Ningche and his own Shon father, and Shirisha remembered the grief that had overwhelmed her old friend when his own Shon father died. Off-worlders visiting from other colonies or neighbors returning home would bring news from afar, fueling local horror and outrage with the latest examples of Earth's corruption and ungodliness. Old news to others around the galaxy, but new to those in No Rivers. Humans being imperfect, it was acceptable that corruption was to be expected. But the corruption on Earth, the murders, the general degradation of humankind, were stunning by Kolonu standards. And a good storyteller could lead his audience aghast and outraged at the godless evil in technologically advanced lands. But it was the children who loved these visiting storytellers most. The children would ask, Is there news about my daddy? What is he doing now? Has he discovered some new planetoid out there? Oh, your daddy, a visitor would reply. He's discovered a watery planet in the eastern quadrant. Or another would reply, your father is which one now? Shirisha would reply, Captain Raymar. The news teller would say, oh, he's so far away, no news of him. Or, he should be back in our sector in a few years. I'll carry your letters to Space Post for him. But sometime in her 5th year, something changed. The mention of Captain Raymar's name brought either anger or praise. Shirisha was never sure why until later when she found out he'd helped the border patrol agents reach the rebel outposts. For some, he was a hero. For others, a sign of Earth's imperialism. Shirisha lived to hear news of her father. He wasn't brown-skinned as she was, but he was her father, a famous explorer, and he loved writing to her and hearing from her. As Hayun showed her the stats and the camera images of Raymar in his room, Shirisha would remember the days of Raymar's strength. Now he lay in bed, unmoving. Occasionally she would think back on the guys in the prison. When she saw how advanced the stim nodes and sims were compared to the older models implanted into prisoners, she felt like crying. Thing was, the robots on the penal colony could have easily manually implanted the entire prison population and switched to the newer, more advanced nodes without putting the entire prison population into the healing ward and messing up the production schedule. But the admins rejected the technology. Newer sims and stims aren't a priority unless they're used as rewards. And prisoners are only rewarded if they prevent a murder or snitch on cellies or compatriots. Preventing a murder or saving some young perp from a gang rape in the showers would be rewarded with a year in solitary in whatever simulated world you wanted. Snitching, a good snitch, one that led to the successful capture of a buddy, would lead to a decade in solitary, a name change, plastic surgery, and a transfer to one of the mining planets or some other poor colony for a new chance at life. That's what happened with Ning Che. Stim was normal for the wealthier planets. In fact, advanced simulations and stimulations were pretty much an art form. And all the computer sims were created by prisoners who could never use them. For the astronauts' world, sim-stim technological art became supreme, high, otherworldly. Worlds culled from their memoirs and reports with the use of transcranial sims, injectable nanosensors, neurophysical amps, and neural electrodes now transformed disabled and aged explorers into their youthful selves as much as the multitudinous gases of the planet had been changed into water and oxygen, and the entire table of elements had been transformed into a habitable world. This terraformed world, Prometheus 10, treated memories like dreamscape, as well they should. For we are all born in a dream, live in a dream, and return to dreamland. Heaven, the truest of dreams. Ning Che is out there somewhere, Shirisha thought, or maybe he was right beside her, cleaning up her drool. If Ning Che has lived to an old age, she wondered, wouldn't he be like Hayun? Stuck in the pod day in and day out, and studying Hayun's little quirks when she was not studying Raymar. She couldn't help thinking of Ning Che. My first, heck, my only, love. Hayun'd say things, stuff only Ning Che or someone with a whore mother from No Rivers might say. Stuff like, who wants to die alone like an old male prostitute? Or he'd refer to ancient arts and crafts into his conversation, using metaphors that only folks from No Rivers would use. Stuff like, you gotta weave it into your conversation, or it's kinda rough-hewn, or not sure what, but I feel like we're knitted together, or what are you thinking? It's the feeling you get when you're facing a blank canvas. Stuff like that. Of course, anyone from No Rivers, either from the American quadrant or the Chinese quadrant or the European quadrant, could say stuff like that. But Ning Che had always been fascinated by old-timey art forms, even more than the typical No Rivers man. Shirisha often found herself thinking, is Hayun really Ning Che? Why does he treat me so tenderly, especially considering how I treated him after his arrest? Despite his love of art, Ning Che had joined the military as a kid, just when she joined the medical corps. Then he went renegade and joined up with Doobie's rebels. After the rebellion on Morgana, he got caught and was placed in the box. He asked to see her. She refused. Not because he'd fought with the rebels. She hated the imperialist and the governments of Earth as much as he did. She just couldn't face him. He and Doobie's gang had killed a lot of astronauts and patrol agents, just to make a stupid point. After a couple of years into his life sentence, he ratted out Doobie, the rebel leader. Doobie had managed to escape. After that, he was taken from general population and transferred into the SIM program. Betraying his friend to get out of the box was pretty ignoble. But life is hard in prison, and the reward for ratting out his friends was 10 years in solitary, immersed in and hooked up to an Eden sim, 3D printed and enhanced food, android women of his own design, children too, if needed, the works. The admins then gave him his cosmetic makeover, then sent him on his way to a new planetoid under the Witness Protection Program. One far from no rivers and all his old haunts and hideouts. She could understand. She might have faced him if betrayal had been the only issue, but why did it have to be me he fixated on? Why was I the model for all Ning Che's android women and daughters? Me at age 5 when we first met, wearing the same dress I wore at that kindergarten party. Me at age 10 when the class visited the entertainment world of Morgana 72. Me at 15 when he took me to the Heron Falls and convinced me not to follow in my mother's footsteps. Me at 20 when we parted, I to nursing school and him to join the military. And me at 38 when we met each other after he had turned traitor. He sent me a lot of notes from the sim world, but not about the betrayal. But why did he have to create so many Shirishas? Especially knowing that the prisoners would be recreating me and seeing me walk among them. They treated me respectfully after all those Sims and Stims versions of me entered the program, but they also sniggered at me. He was a sweet guy, but damn it, he was petty as hell, and the more I avoided him, the more of me he created. On the day he was sent away, Shirisha had sent him a message. Nothing he could do would ever make her forgive him. She added a few old-timey expletives to show him she meant business. 2 weeks later, legs still wobbly from 2 years of cryosleep and lungs reacclimatized to oxygen, Shirisha stepped outside the pod and breathed without an oxy-amp. Immediately after, she burst into tears. Foot on dry land, free from the box and the pod, she felt new life coursing through her heart as she walked under the fake sun. She realized how imprisoning others had also imprisoned her. For 2 days straight, her tear ducts were not dry, whether from tears of sorrow or tears of joy, or from the oxygen reacclimatization, she wasn't sure. And all the while, He-Yun kept saying, "Go ahead and cry. It's normal. It's normal." After He-Yun tested Shirisha's skills on the modern sim-stim technologies, he declared that she had passed the acid test. And then, after a sly grin, he added, "I've assigned Captain Raymar to you." Shirisha could barely hold in her excitement. "I figured you would," she replied, her throat still achy from the tube. "He was your Shon father on your home world, after all." "You seriously know way too much about me," Shirisha said. "Glad you persisted in getting me here." "Same here." Then it was time to work and to meet her patients. He-Yun at her side, she met the frail humans who were nothing like the guys on her astronaut collector's cards. Many were still strong and sprightly. Others, like Raymar, were frail, immobile because of age or accidents. Unlike prisoners who represented the worst of men, astronauts represented humanity's dreams. And now here they were, as affected by old age ills as their ancestors would have been, as attacked by age as if they'd lived evil, mundane lives. "So, you're my new nurse?" Raymar asked when she entered his room. His voice was soft, world-weary, gravelly. "That's me," she said. "Shirisha, from a prison planet?" He sucked at the few grinders he had left. "That's me." "He-Yun's been excited as hell waiting for you." He smiled sadly. "He's got a crush on you, I think." "I bet." Shirisha half smiled at He-Yun as he walked toward Raymar's pod. "I bet you've seen some sights. Ever met that long-desired alien?" "No one looks for aliens anymore." Raymar sounded disappointed and bitter. All these years, and humanity has found neither immortality, God, gods, or aliens. But the wonder makes up for it, Heiyun said. Or you still feel the fear when you travel to parts unknown? No fear. Not too much wonder. The machine shrugged for Raymar, and definitely not the fountain of youth. As a young man, he'd been handsome. Squinty-eyed cowboy type the U.S. government liked. Native American dad, Caucasian mom. He was now a shadow fading from one world into the next, his immobile body wrapped in psyllium and hooked up to sim nodes. So what's today's plan? Heiyun asked. The rocklands of Terra 36, Raymar said. Been a while since I went there. That's programmed into the system? Shirisha asked. It's fire and lava. He likes walking around in the fire, Heiyun explained. It's not like pain has been programmed into the system. All the explored lands are in the system, and the calculations of their gravity, Raymar said. All of them? Shirisha asked. Even the rebel colonies? Especially the rebel colonies, Raymar laughed. Nice planets. No wonder they wanted the Commonwealths to leave them alone. You know how to operate the modules? Shirisha nodded. I had to learn. The penal colony rewards guys with it. She quickly added, not as sophisticated as the ones here, though. So you don't know it? Raymar asked. Oh, I know it. I learned it in cryosleep. The folks at the ship's landing port wake you up when you get there. But in the meantime, to make your trip better, you're hooked up to dream sims. You're taught and educated within a 2-year dream. Stop telling him stuff he already knows, Heiyun said, then added, It's good for education and all, but give me the real world and teach me stuff the old-fashioned ways. Not that I have anything against sims and stims, but I know the dangers of living in an imaginary world. To us kids from no rivers, daydreaming was our drug. I shudder to think what we would have done if we could have gotten our hands on some of this equipment. Shirisha noted his comment, but said nothing. She pressed the button to angle Raymar's sleeping pod, making it more vertical. Not so quick, Heiyun said to Shirisha. Then to Raymar, he said, Not feeling woozy or anything? She did that a bit fast. You okay? I'm good, Raymar answered. Liar, Heiyun said. You have the records of my biosignals? Raymar asked as Shirisha fiddled with the computer's buttons. Yep, she extended her hand to the pod and smiled apologetically. It was new, after all. Heiyun handed her the hub with the record of the rocklands. You still like weightlessness? Shirisha asked Raymar. Not always been a fan, Raymar said. I'm happiest with my feet on solid ground, thank you. But my health being what it is. What's your homeworld? A little podunk planetoid off New Ceres. Why do you ask? No rivers? Raymar asked, and there was an odd glint in his eyes. You know it? Shirisha asked, almost gushing. Why wouldn't I? It's one of the largest pleasure planets in the quadrant. Bare bones. Retro. No technology at all. You always say that like it's a good thing, Heiyun said, his tone dark. Raymar might have shrugged. Shirisha wasn't sure if it was the machine or if his 90% useless body had initiated a shrug. The look on his face was something between interest and jaded, as if he'd already heard everything Heiyun could ever say on the matter of imperialism. Some explorers are like that. Some people yearn for the past, Raymar answered, as if stating the obvious was a burdensome duty he had to indulge in. They think it's fun learning the ancient crafts. Pottery, learning to sew, knitting, crocheting, instead of buying stuff. Shirisha glanced at Heiyun to see his reaction. Heiyun replied, People on Earth always say the more intelligent you are, the more moral you are. They assumed space travel would bring peace on Earth. It didn't. It brought hell to the universe. Not that they believe in hell or even heaven. Only poor folk like me on pleasure or mining planets believe in the supernatural. Maybe because we had to. We were not only cut off from all that Earth education, but we were also cut off from any benefits you could have given us, in sectors of the galaxy all alone by ourselves, with our nearest help millions of light years away. Heck, we had to believe in God because you made us fend for ourselves for your own pleasure. And hell, if the powers that be found out about God's existence or non-existence, they'd think twice about sharing any of that truth with us. And you especially, you explorers of space, why do you deserve to enter dreams while we can't? Yes, Shirisha thought, this guy is Ningche. Raymar chuckled, his body moving slightly under his bodysuit. Are we going to argue about this again, Heian? Life made me a realist, I guess. Shirisha had seen sick folks in pods in her job. In the prison, they let inmates linger, keeping them alive indeterminately until their bodies wore out. She studied Raymar, who, despite his high status in society, seemed just as trapped in life as aged prisoners. Weariness. I'm weary. Weary. That was what Raymar's body seemed to be saying. And bitter, too. But there was relief as well. Death was near. Freedom from the world where he had had to live like a ready sword. Now, or at least soon, the sword would be sheathed, and he would return to the void as purposeless and insignificant as he had been at birth. He had lived a life of importance, and now it was time to go. But why was he still alive? Surely the benefits of euthanasia would have been his. Why was he still around, especially in a government-run facility? Poor colonists living in colonial planetoids are particularly proud of their Earth heritage, Raymar was saying, because the poorer colonists were prohibited from using the technological gadgets of Earthers. They turned their lack into a virtue, considering themselves the last bastions of humanity, the only true humans left in the universe, untainted by technology. They're not exactly rigid, but certain things that Earth-born humans allow and accept are considered vile in the poorer colonists, and vice versa. Shirisha watched the interaction in silence, thinking, okay, so this is how it is with these two. There was a river on No Rivers. A lake, actually. Lake Vera. It wrapped the planetoid's equator like a belt. Its waters rose up from a fountain from deep below its inner shell, and also from the firmament, an airy atmosphere created for human and avian life. There was no rain there, but mists and dew would rise at night to water the planet. On this river, Shirisha and Ningche would sail. It took about 4 months to circumnavigate the planet. Despite the anger of their mothers and stepfathers, they would dream about their future together. When they die, we'll be together. Our parents' generation are dying out. When they die, we'll be together, they had promised each other. No Rivers had its good and bad side, and yes, the clannishness was the main bad thing. Watch out for him, Heian said as they left Raymar's room. Why? Just be prepared and be strong. You're being cryptic. Of course I'm being cryptic. I'm from No Rivers. After several weeks, the reason for Heian's cryptic comment suddenly became clear. Shirisha, Raymar suddenly asked one day as she attached his tubings and cleaned his nodes, would you consider killing me? What? Shirisha asked, turning from her work to look at him. Heian's not going to do it, and none of the others will either. Why not? Some of them are religious, and the others are just plain punitive. So why do you think I would do it? A hope, I guess. I've been studying you, and you seem more pliable. Maybe working among prisoners has made you less unforgiving, and forget that hope of yours, Shirisha said. It's not like everyone in the facility is from No Rivers. Not all the colony are as staunch as No Rivers folk, or rigid, as you put it, and it's not against the law to do medical euthanasia. True, but Heian is supervisor here. He's gathered every family member of every rebel leader from the Morgana revolt. It's legal, Shirisha replied, then added under her breath, and perhaps you deserve it. Raymar half grinned as much as his near-paralyzed face would let him. Heian loves you. If you kill me, he won't harm you, and they won't challenge him. Whether he will or not, I'm not going to take your life, Shirisha said. What foolishness! You know how No Rivers people are. Life is the most important thing to us. We do not kill, ever. We don't abort our children. If we have too many, we adopt them out to relatives or friends. We're the only planetoid in this quadrant where the death penalty exists. And why? Because we believe it is the worst kind of evil for one person to kill another. It's wrong to kill a human being, Captain Raymar. Life for life. And now you're asking me to go against my principles? How can I face the Creator if I did such a thing? And you're not a believer. Why should I kill you and thrust you into hell? Your suffering there would be worse than all your suffering in this life." Raymar held up a tired hand. Okay, he said. "I guess I figured you wrong." "You sure did." Fuming, Shirisha began walking out of the room. The damn nerve! These enlightened imperialists always want to come and tell us poor colonists what to do. "You people from the boonies." Shirisha spun around. "You people?" she echoed. "You colonists from wealthier worlds always look down on us. We marry. We adopt instead of aborting. We marry. Yes, even the government whores in our world marry monogamously when they retire, and they raise their children well. We're not inferior to you. In fact, we're superior to you, because we have some humanity and common decency left. And now you want me to murder? If I or anyone on No Rivers did such a thing and got away with it unpunished, No Rivers would fall from the sky. Our great lake would dry up." "You believe that crap? That's a myth. Every individual is part of the whole. What I do affects everyone else. I can't do this great sin and destroy my world." "You guys still believe that crock? And to think you were my shown father. Are you saying my life doesn't matter?" "Am I your shown father?" Raymar chuckled. "I don't want to go back to living in alternate anticipated pasts with Sean fathers and idealized mothers," Shirisha quickly retorted. "Still, if I'm your shown father," Raymar replied, "you owe it to me, don't you? My existence, my presence, the story of my life was what affected you when you were young. Don't you think you owe your father a good death?" Raymar's words unexpectedly stung, and tears, too, stung her eyes. Once she had indeed loved him as a father, and she had loved him more than her stepfather, the retired miner her mother had married. "And why did you, my shown father, help to kill those rebels?" He smiled a trace of sadness. "Colonies? Self-rule? Gods, morals, old words. How old are you, anyway?" "Old enough to not carry this conversation on any longer. I'm getting tired." "World weariness, I understand. That why you came here? That why you left the box?" "I figured I should live a better life before I go to see my maker." A mocking, patronizing smile came across Raymar's lips. Yes. You believe in the maker?" "You were my Sean father," Shirisha said. "You know the custom, as you said." "I do. Prostitutes telling their children their fathers were astronauts. Or rebels. Yes, or rebels. And I'm honored to know I had such a good shown daughter. Why did you choose me? When did you find out that your mother picked my name out of a hat?" "When I was 7. The day before I went to the international school." "Must be hard." "It helped us as we grew up, both Ningche and me." She had slipped up, saying the wrong name, but Raymar only smiled. "Good to hear. I kept liking you even after I learned the truth." She did not say that she had sent him notes and holocards via galactic mail, but he smiled. "I had a lot of those, you said. They tapered off over the years." "They did," Shirisha said, "as did the lives of the rebels in boxes all over the galaxy." "Oh," he said, changing the topic. "Which world do you want to visit today? The former conversation is over with?" "For now." The wilds of 7 TNA. Sheesh, I totally understand why Heiyun would hate this place. Holodeck or not, this place is stressful. Lush in parts, sun-scorched in others. A tidally locked planet. Shirisha watched her shown father lying on his pod while the sim module showed where his thoughts were, but only his thoughts. 3 centuries and not even the transfer of consciousness had been accomplished. Nothing that can help these aging heroes of theirs who inundated us with their collector cards. Can't make their minds better, and even if they could stop the ravages of time on the mind, they can't remove those healthy minds from their disabled bodies. And yet it was something. She remembered her 2 weeks of immobility after the 2-year trip. Raymar was now smiling, his frail, immobile body ignored. He was free. He was in sim treatment. My Sean father, she thought. I owe him. She called to Heiyun over the intercom. "Come, I want to talk to you." After an hour of discussion, a compromise was met, perhaps even forgiveness, for all concerned. When Raymar came out of the simulation, they told him their solution. They could not kill him, but they could make his ending days better. Would he like to be locked into the sim world for the rest of his life? Nothing much would be needed. Feeding tubes and nodes had already been attached. The only difference was that, unlike his former travels, he wouldn't be able to exit that world. Being locked in required some sacrifice. He would be alone except for the androids. In the future, he would hear no human voice. Even the prisoners could choose to hear human voices, but this, I agree, Raymar said when they told him. So the day came when Raymar was locked in. Not euthanasia, not murder, only a long waiting. He would only come out of the simulation when his body gave up and was dying. It was all she could do for her Shon father while retaining her own integrity. Some years later, visiting colleagues in the garden she shared with Heiyun, whom she knew as Ningche, told her the news of Raymar's death. She looked up at the sky, past the Dyson sphere, into the darkness that hid the light. "Shon father," she said, "you searched for life throughout our galaxy, and you did not find it. Earth remains unique. As far as we know, biological life of any sort only exists on Earth or on planetoids where the descendants of Earth dwellers live. I suspected the strange miracle of life and urged you to accept a creator as your own life ended, and to pray for forgiveness for what you did to the rebels. As two old folks approaching our life's end, although I am a mere 80 and you 105, we have talked. Daughter to father, we have talked. From your privileged life, you mocked my old-fashioned faith, an old woman's delusion, the pitiful beliefs of the uneducated, you thought. For you, old explorer, who have had to toss the corpses of your fellow explorers into utter darkness, powerlessness with its myriad sorrows came. Did you understand your guilt as you lay dying? I heard you whispered Amen when you died, but the media did not mention that." The end.